questions. And the reading provides an image that we can look at together and that we can discuss. So in a way, the presentation and the discussion is not two separate moments. So maybe we can think how we organize the time and how we come together to a question, maybe from your past discussions or from maybe the future discussions.
Valentina, do you feel that? Sorry.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the invitation to be part of the group. And then I'm sorry I couldn't be part of the whole thing because I triple booked for the end of the fall, for this time of the year. But it's also, I think it is in a way a good thing that we are joining now. It's the last meeting, and as Valentina was saying, we usually begin with the whole thing begins with the formulation of the question itself, and I think it's a good thing that we come to talk with the group as part of the group towards formulating the question that comes out of all the previous meetings without having any inclination as to how or what question we would like to, we would like to formulate that particular question. So Valentina was suggesting that we would have like 3 moments, right? The formulation of the question, the laying out of the cards, and then the reading, the collective reading. That's how it would look like. So do you want to say something, Vi?
No, and then we can figure out maybe when a break can happen, in the conversation, and let it go to the second part.
Absolutely. So is there a methodology for formulating the question? Do you want people to put suggestions on the chat?
Yes. I mean, I just thought that the question would come from everything that's happened with the group so far. So that's where we would begin. And then folks would like to... Yeah, if you put in the chat, it's easier because then we can read the chat as we read the cards too. It's I think it would be better than speaking in that sense. What do you think? I mean, it's also...
We've been talking about different aspects of our collective predicament, including questions of death and dying, how to hold space for all the grief. We have talked about how to bring different knowledge systems together without idealizing or romanticizing any knowledge, so that we can have space for the unknown, unknowable of the metabolism of the planet, of the land, and of the cosmos. How do we keep that balance? We have talked about rites of passage, initiation, and also how addiction is part of our mode of relating to the world. We have talked about the role of education in all of this, and we have been thinking also about the role of social innovation in all of this, and how the university relates to all of this. But I'll open the mic for other people to also express what they feel that maybe a question or something that we've talked about that is important to have a bearing on this reading.
Maybe it's also worth saying, you like normally would go for a reading, a tarot reading, when something is not right, and then you would go for a reading because somehow something is at stake. So I guess, the conversation have gone, and also the reading, it's for us all together right now, right here. So I think it's totally valid to go through also the feeling of what itches or what's there at stake that feels like a real question for both yourself and the topic and the context, so it doesn't have to be either a very like conceptually formulated question. It can come from any place emotionally, something you've been from the discussion, something from.
Could I suggest something? We have been talking about various kinds of transformations that we've been going through in all these areas that Vanessa mentioned, and we've been reconsidering these transformations as a form of preparation for a transformation we are expecting to go through. So I'm wondering, would that help?
We could think the questions around transformation. Yes. Renee?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I think it's in line of what you were saying, Valentina, and I think maybe in line of what Lynn was also suggesting. It's such a difficult period to ask a question. You know, it's kind of like, okay, the entire world's messed up. So what kind of questions should we even be asking in this situation? So that's kind of like a question for me right now. I'm not sure if that's the question, but a question.
Yeah, well, one thing that we have, we always have in mind is that we come up with a question, but the spread it doesn't provide so much of, doesn't provide an answer for the question, but actually it complexifies the question and bringing out all different aspects that are playing out together, and many of them we are not aware of, right? So the question is not a question of how to do something or why something is happening. The very formulation of the question has to be one that allows for, because we are going to use the Celtic cross, for the Celtic cross to, bring things out, and things that we think with, right? Whatever will come out is not also an answer. It's just a recomposition of the question itself. So both, Lynn, Mario, the transformation that is to be prepared, but because of the transformation, we have no idea what you're preparing for. And then Renee, yes, I mean, what questions are relevant for this moment? I think those are very interesting ways. I mean, they're getting at where we want to go. I think if we keep talking.
I think there's also the question about where do we go from now? So we've opened something up, and this group now can't disband today or stay together in several different ways. And there's a question about what next? Like where are we coming from? Where are we at? Where are we going? And what should we focus on? What are the challenges? What should we focus on? Which is what the Celtic cross actually does. Just a suggestion.
There is also curiosity for me around what happened between all of us. I don't know, this morning thinking about today, I was kind of noticing some shifts in myself that may have been nourished by this group. So I'm curious, like, if, this transformation of this us, what is it like?
Thank you, Stephen. There's also two things in the chat. I don't know if everybody's seeing, but there are things in the chat as well. There's a contribution from Vicky talking about appropriation of land, knowledge, wealth, culture, the waves of taking what isn't ours and consuming it. And there's a question from Dougal saying, how do we prepare for the unknown world or worlds that lies ahead beyond the end of the world as we know it?
I think Haruko would like to speak. Haruko, did you raise your hand earlier? Okay, look in the bottom left, yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that is really important is the resonances that come into our bodies and our thinking, our emotions, and to pay attention to those and put those into, to allow that without even words to be the question. One of the things that comes up with for me, because I do tarot for myself when I'm needing some alternative directions to be pointed for me. When I do things like this, coming to this series, and every morning I do ceremonies. One of them is from the sun dance, and the other is from the witnessing and experiencing with the Brazilian and Peruvian people that we have been working with. And I'm finding that that actually provides more of a direction. And actually, when I sit with that, what comes is increments of movement that are actually helping. So I don't know if verbal questions is necessarily the way that we need to go, but to have practices that will help that non-oral kind of guidance to come through, which is not something that can be necessarily shared through Zoom. And this is the thing I'm finding actually helps me move is, and then comes in the cognitive to give it some sort of more conceptual framework, maybe is an idea. Okay.
Yeah, there is also some questions in the chat. So from Kira, and in addition to what Douglas asked, how to continue to invite people and ourselves deeper into the breaking or unknown worlds. And then Lisa, I think tarot might open us for us our questions of the energies we're bringing, how it's changing in our dynamic. So nonverbal and curious about the energies flowing through our questioning. And then Peter, how do we, as our warring ancestor, make peace with each other so that we can move forward? How do we make them see what cows their action have caused? I have seen this work before. And then Felix, how do we stop othering? And just listening to the conversation and the questions, I was seeing two possible directions. One, for example, to ask the tarot spread to give us an image of what the transformation that is happening right now may be. And so that could be both a social, the transformation of the world, but also within the group or within each one of us. And another one could be more like focusing on the group and the practices and what's flowing through it or where it's going or what. So I'm gonna lay the cards and take a picture and put it on the chat or somehow figure out how to share this.
There's one more question that appeared. Looking to the world, it's from Francis Wesley. Looking to the world after the end of the world as we know it, I think of the unborn children that will find themselves in this new landscape. I wonder whether we could resume the education theme. How do we prepare future generations for the kind of relationships, mindsets, emotions, and spiritual presence needed to manage and live in that world in some harmony with each other in the biosphere?
Okay, so this is our reading. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go through the position so that everybody knows where is what. So this card in the middle of the cross. So we have this cross. Maybe one thing is to consider we ask for an image of the transformation we're going through. So the first cross in the middle, the first card is the vertical one, and the second card is the one that is on top, or in this image just under it. And this is the issue or the present situation, and something that is covering the issue of the present situation. So in a way, it's a first crossing that answer to the question of what this transformation is. Then underneath there is that which is maybe unconscious or invisible, but is taking part in the situation. On the left, the Queen of Cups is the past, but the past that made the present possible. And then on the top, the image on the top, we have the what is visible, or how this questions or the issue becomes visible. And then on the right side, we have the unfolding or the future or that which has to come. And this is as the question. Then on the column on the right side, that's called the pillar of transformation. So at the bottom, the High Priestess there, it's a card that indicates all of us. So the people that the reading is for. Just above it, there is the environment, what the environment offers or how the environment sees the transformation in this case. And then on top of it, there is hopes and fears, or hopes or fears, depending on how you read it. And then the last card on top is the outcome, if this image manifests itself. And then outside on the left, up there, there is a card that is more like a signifier. It's a cipher. It gives us an idea of how to read the image. And the card in diagonal at the bottom is the root of the reading. So it's the card that was at the bottom of the deck when we spread the card, which gives us a sense of what's rooting this reading.
It's it's funny when it becomes almost so obvious. Let's do another reading. So the issue, right? The first card is a Seven of Wands, which shows a person facing challenges from a position, from how would I say that? A favorable position, right? Because the person is on top of the hill and the challenges are coming from below. So what's the stakes? The issue is multiple challenges, not only one. That's how I would also interpret that, because usually we talk about challenges, but here there are multiple. And that's covered by the Page of Wands, which is it's a messenger, right? It's a new message. And because it's wands, you can also say that the challenges and the message, they are of a spiritual nature. They are creative. They are, they're about bands, not band in terms of a time, but band in terms of goals and hopes. And so the image is that. We can see, I mean, it's something to consider as we continue to look at the spread, is whether the message is the challenge or the challenge is the message. But that we don't know. At least I can tell yet. And since there are other readers, it would be nice to hear from.
Yeah, anybody who reads tarot and there's, interpretation or meaning associated with the cards, please jump in and add to it.
Yeah, because for us, what's important about these the reading is that it is a collaboration. It is done together, not only in terms of who is doing the reading, like us here, but also that as we read the cards, we're reading them with others who have read them before and who will read them later and who are reading them at the same time. Because the meanings for the cards and the positions and the spreads, they're things that come out of the practice itself. So every time we read with everybody. It's always collective. But Valentina, have anything comes to you from the initial cross?
Well, yeah, I also had the doubt if the message was coming through the challenge and the message is being challenged, or if the message itself is the challenge. And this is to see throughout the reading. And also thinking that the 0 card, the card that it's the Ace of Wands, which is, is the same element of fire, and we have 3 aces. So at least we know that there is some beginning possible, not just the end. But so that also reinforces that this image has something to do with this creative and collective seed that is coming through. So that reinforces that maybe the message is the challenge. And then from the unconscious, we have the Three of Pentacles. That's the number 3 of the element of earth. And there's a scene, you see there's like 3 people collaborating to make a building of some kind. So it's really a card that indicates material collaboration at the level of resources, of knowledge, and that movement of building. And this is happening, this is a part of the challenge or that message that maybe it's unseen, but it's happening underneath. And then on the
and then it's so it is, it's collaboration, but it's collaboration in building, in studying, in thinking, in doing something. And it's but it's not the beginning. While the aces are all about beginnings, the Three of Pentacles shows that some collaborative work has been done, some studying has been done together. So, and then again, since we are reading for, that is, the question that since we're reading now at the end of the meetings, you can ask whether that work has started. It is about the work the group has done so far. So it shows that there is more to come from the group to that question. But it's also about whether or not, to me at least, when I look at it, the group is then doing a work, it's part of a work that's been going on for, then we don't know, right? For how many ever years and different people. So yes, that's what I want to say.
And also anybody can jump in with question, or even if you or clarifications, or as we walk with, there's no set time when we can all speak. Then on the card on the left, that's the card of the past, and that's the Queen of Cups. So we have the Queen of the element of water now. So the element of water that is related to the intuition, to care, to the collective. I think for me, the collective care, but also again, creativity in this nourishing way. And the Queen of Cups is one of the tool of the Empress, so the power to take care, but take care through the waters, and that is something that that form of power is enabling this challenge and this message.
Yeah, and then she's the intuitive queen, right? She's the one also who takes care of things, of shared things, of emotions. So she's an emotional healer. So so the one question here is, she's the one bringing the challenges about, and we can look at her as being that one wand of the Seven of Wands, the one with whom that person is facing the challenges. Or we could, because she's intuitive, she could also be indicating the level at which the challenge is taking place. I don't know quite how to say that, right?
For me, that relates also to somebody who wrote the question before about like coming together. Like there's like how do people can come together, and I think maybe at that emotional level, there's something, this indicates that something at the challenge is maybe more at that emotional level of coming together.
Yeah.
And then the card on top, that is how maybe this challenge, this transformation becomes visible, or the way we're thinking about it in a more conscious way. It's the Six of Pentacles, where there is a kind of redistribution of resources. It's again the element of earth, and there is somebody who's giving money, but in that card you never know if you're giving or you're receiving, so it kind of indicates the circulation, and there is a scale, so indicating a just circulation, a just redistribution. And again, it's three people, like in the card downstairs, the card below of the unconscious, indicating again this movement of circulation in the one below as building, and then in the one above as a more general societal redistribution.
Yes, Rene?
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Valentina. I just have a question because you mentioned number 3 2 times, and I'm just wondering, is there something in the teachings of Tarot about the balance of number 3? And the reason why I'm asking is because, like, I know nothing about Tarot. I'm like the engineer type, but in engineering, a tripod is one of those few things that are stable in uneven terrain, right? So wherever you put it, it's gonna stand. And I'm just wondering if that, like, there's anything like this in Tarot?
Yeah. So the number 3, it's so on the one hand, it is the moment of you could think of a moment of beginning of maybe viabilization for something, because you need, that is the 1, and then you need 2 in order to proceed, and then 3 shows some kind of growth. So it's a number of growth. So in the case of the Three of Pentacles, it is growth, materially thought growth, and then you have we don't have it, and the Three of the Empress is, which the Queen of Cups indicates, is one of abundance, nurturing, and also related to pregnancy, etc. So reproduction. So yeah, so it's not quite stable, because stability comes with 4, but it is it's viability. It's because 1 and 2 generated something in that sense. Maybe that's. But it's interesting that we have like Valentina said, have the 3 persons in the Six of Pentacles, and but then we have the balance, which has 2, and because the Six of Pentacles is so much tied to justice, there is a little interference in the ways in which we think of justice, maybe. Especially when we think of it as expressed materially, because both cards are pentacles, the Three of Pentacles in the unconscious, and then the Six of Pentacles in the conscious. So thinking of justice in terms of balance, you have 1 and 1. But with the 3, you expand. I think and that's one of the meanings, one of the ways we interpret the Six of Pentacles. It is not so much about achieving a balance, but it's more about the circulation, the movement, as Valentina was saying, like the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it also shifts considerations of justice from one of maybe localization, identification, because when the card shows up, you don't necessarily know if you're the one giving or receiving. So the focus is more on the relation that is that circulation, the need for that circulation. But what I want to highlight is that, in terms of how it's the conscious view, the interpretation for the situation is one of justice, and expressed materially, conceived materially. And then there is a Six of Swords as the future, card number 6. We read it as the future, but also sometimes as what it's actually about. And the swords are related to, they are air, right? They correspond to the air, element of air, and all the correspondences to air, which are intellectual, that are mental, mostly intellectual, whatever. And the Six of Swords is the best one, I think, the only. And it's healing. It likes moving from the troubled waters to better waters. So it's an emotional healing that it is expressed, intellectually. And that's a nice pair to have the 2 sixes there, justice and healing in the same spread.
It's also like the possibility to leave some ideas behind, some of those words, some of those concepts, some of those tools that were used for discernment, to only keep some and then be able to move on. So maybe in terms of what is dying or what, that also relates. And it's interesting, it's 2, 6 and a 3. So it's a kind of doubling of the 3. You have the 2, 6.
Well, we have 1, 2, 3, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the 6 doubling, but the numbers in the spread are 1, 2,
and 3. Yeah. So
awesome.
these 2 crosses are kind of we can consider them as an image of the transformation that we were asking for. So that's this, and then the pillar of transformation, then that brings it back to us. So the card that indicates all of us in the reading right now is the High Priestess, which is the only major arcana also in the reading, and which she sits there at the gate, let's say at the veil of the occult knowledge, or that which, of the invisible knowledge. And she so uses the intuition, the occult knowledge, in order to produce knowledge, basically. I think that's
Yeah, so she how do you say what it's an interesting one to it's an interesting one to have there, because it's our position, because so she's intuition, she's in there in the she takes care of that passage between the unconscious, spiritual, and the conscious, intellectual, the material. But thinking about us, it's like it feels like channeling what's being highlighted in there. If you think in terms, and now it's important because remember Valentina had the 2 different versions for the question. The second one about the group, and that position is a position of the group. And the High Priestess there is indicating that the group is channeling, the larger questions are coming through the group, but then she's also passive, right? She's receiving and she's transmitting. She's not acting. It's not like the Three of Pentacles, which is about the action. So that's also something that we could talk about in terms of what it is. Yeah, what's if the question of the group continuing, that studying that we've been doing together, that studying that the group has joined, right? That study that has been going on for a long time in different places. So that is a connection to consider between the Three of Pentacles and the High Priestess, I think.
Yeah, because then as it moves on, the environment, what is offering, or maybe how it sees, I would say in this case the question, but also the group, because it says it's the seed for a new beginning. So it's another ace, but this time it's an ace of pentacles. So it's the element of earth. It's something that concretely manifests. It's a seed that has to be planted in a way. And that is in the card of the environment.
Yeah. And then the position 9, fears and hopes, is Ace of Swords, which is the beginning, the seed, the beginning of a new intellectual project, or the beginning of a new struggle. You can choose both of them at the same time. And that is, we don't know in terms of both the group and the situation which you're looking at, whether a new intellectual project or a new fight is something that is feared or hoped for. And that might be also something that you need to reflect on, to consider, where, in terms of, again, the groups, how the group is situated in this context.
And then the outcome, you have the Two of Wands, and that's the card up on top where the person is holding the world, like a world. I'm gonna try to make it bigger. Do you see if I do this?
Yes.
To make it bigger, okay. And it's this moment of stability after something has been initiating, number 2. So this passive moment, but a moment of consideration and planning ahead and figuring out what is the next step and what is the but because we have the Ace of Wands here, then we have that also means that maybe there is that seed, that message, that seed of the message has been received, and now it has to be, continued. So there's really this sense of continuity because of what Denise was saying also before, that 1, 2, 3 present very much in the reading.
Yeah. And then we have one twice in terms of wands. We have the page, right, which is also a seed at the beginning, and then the Ace of Wands. And then there is a V or a triangle, because we have this with the significant, the Ace of Wands, and then the inner cross, which is both wands, and the Two of Wands.
This one.
Somehow the the leadership, the vision that comes, and the world to become a little that is indicated by the Two of Wands. It goes through that inner cross in a very important way.
Denise, can you talk a little bit more about the significance of wands? Because there's a lot in the reading, right?
Yes, it's central. The wands are the fire, right? The correspondence is the element of fire, and fire is, is the creative, it's the destructive, it is the spiritual. It is ethical, right? Because it is, the fire is related to the final causes, so all the multiplicity of the theory is, I think, has to be contemplated. But I think, but I think what's very strong there is that it is intuitive. It's not. I don't know. Don't see. Doesn't ask for movement. Is the Queen of Cups and the High Priestess, indicating that the need, that mediation. It's not a fire that you light, is a fire that comes through. So but because of course you're talking about the end of the world as we know it, right? I mean, you're already calling for the fire, that the burning that cleanses, but then also the burning, the fire that cleanses, and then it's also the fire that provides the warmth necessary for something else. Because fire,
perhaps for cooking, it's the cooking.
The cooking.
For fermenting and cooking something. It's what I'm starting to see. When you said about the message being the challenge, it's exactly what I feel in education. There are spaces where I cannot talk about this. Mostly at the university, we cannot talk about this. There are actually measures being taken so that we won't be able to talk about this, because people are afraid that the students are going to be anxious, or it will cause depression, immobilization, or even self-harm. So that I can see that definitely the message of the end of the world as we know it is in that. For me, it resonated a lot. But then there's a part about in this group it's not about like scaling it up, it's about cooking it further, rather than, it's like my intuition too in this is that we're not ready yet to open it up to a lot of people. For example, we need to be going deeper rather than to be going wider. That's the time for the inch deep, it's not inch deep, mile wide, it's mile deep, inch wide, more or less. That's, I think, how I felt about it. Is it what you're like? Because there's a move, when you said there's no movement, it's not that there's no move, it's depth movement rather than outward movement. What do you think?
Yes, yeah, I think so, because I think Valentina was pointing to the Knight of Swords.
Yeah. And because that we didn't talk about, but I think that's what's rooting the reading. And so it's in what's rooting this reading. It's maybe like it's a theme that we should do something, it's a drive to action. It's a drive to fight. It's a drive to do something about it. And this is what...
Without thinking much.
Yeah, it's a hasty action, like we have to do something. And then instead what's coming, it's like, no, you have to sit at that gate and let this message come through. See, operate at that in this visible manner to that redistribution that is material, but it's not just a material redistribution, because some kind of healing comes through it, because then something can be left behind. And then the next steps will be clear. That two of wands, because that's so it. I think that also is and I think maybe here is the message and the challenge, that the way we think about what it is to take action, or what it is to do something, or how to bring in the new. You were already talking about cooking, Vanessa, which is already a different image of than like knowing or fighting, but there is maybe here something like just like wait and see what let it happen to you, because also the question was about transformation, and the High Priestess also reminds you that you have no control over this.
And Lisa comment on the chat about the masculine and feminine energy. I think it's very much, it is a feminine energy throughout, because we have the High Priestess and the Empress just in disguise in the reading, and yeah, so you can think of the Queen of Cups being pregnant, right? The pregnant.
Denise, would you say then, because we have the Queen of Cups and the High Priestess and the feminine element, as you mentioned, that the challenge, a way to avoid or to minimize the challenge to the message is a path through sensibility and not rationality?
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so. And I think the material in the Three of Pentacles in there, it is a sensibility, at the level of the intuition, but I think it's also the body. I think it's also material in that sense, really the senses. It is asking for I would say, I don't know why it comes to me like, it is a diving into these waters, maybe being cooked a little bit.
It's more by being cooked rather than cooking. And I'm thinking about also the talk the conversation before about the nonverbal and paying attention to how those vibration, maybe shifts in your body, or this transformation that maybe people have been going through personally, but also the state of the world. And how do we know when we don't, how do we go about knowing when we don't just go and know it or do something about it? And maybe the feminine also in these terms as a receptive or like paying attention, like a different attitude to it.
Could I ask, one of the things that really strikes me that hit me so powerfully is that Knight of Swords, and the way that image resonates with a particular orientation to pedagogy. There's a way in which I recognize the Knight of Swords as an approach to pedagogy. The way that energy of movement, of the sword of discernment, but it's not discernment. It's got the sword, but it's a rationality, but it's also, there's a particular kind of almost
arrogance,
conquistadorial energy to that, and it resonates so deeply with me with an approach to pedagogy that is collapsing for me, and then the spread is the response to that.
And it's also approach to critique, right? It's a teaching, but it's also how we go about talking about justice and
yes.
So it's the whole package. Yeah. So, shall we take a break? How would you like to move with this?
Yes, we could. We could take a 5-minute break. And generally we ask people who are presenting if they have any suggestion for the break, any practice that might help us come back to the depth that we need in these kinds of gatherings.
Well, I think meditate on what we've seen and talked about. There is nothing else to do.
And drink water.
Telling you what to do.
Drink water and meditate on the reading. So we will be back in 5 minutes. It is 5 minutes past the hour, and then we're back here. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Valentina and Denise. I think, this has been a wonderful experience to end a whole series of a cycle of sessions relating to the end of the world as we know it. I think one of the things it has pointed to is exactly what was emphasized at the beginning is the part in that phrase, as we know it, right? Because there are other worlds that we have been taught to unlearn and not know, more than human worlds. And when I say more than human worlds, perhaps worlds which conform to a particular dominant, let's say, colonial view of what human is, right? And what you have shown here is how we can read these other worlds, have access to these other knowledges. This involves, let's say, reading, and how our imprisonment within one particular world has got a lot to do with how we've learned to read. How when I say read, I mean how we have learned to make meaning or to make sense of things, and what do we make meaning of, and what do we make sense of. We have been taught that reading is simply decodifying, right? That it's got nothing to do with the body. It's nothing to do. It's got nothing to do with opacity. It's transparent. It's based on transparency. So all we do is we decodify letters, which are supposed to represent sounds, and then we automatically get to the meaning. What you have shown here is that there are other ways of accessing knowledge, right? By using other forms of meaning making and other forms of accessibility to meaning. And these are forms of meaning which our colonial rationality has taught us to devalue, right? Because we can't prove anything that we've said here. Is it scientific? Are we just imagining things? Is this all a big delusion? Or, well, if it makes sense to us, it makes sense, right? But this is not how we've been taught how to accept meaning making. And I'd just like to say that there are certain aspects of this which are important to remember when we are looking at having access to other worlds, because these other worlds, we may be so involved in the world as we know it that when these other worlds appear to us, we may not even perceive them because we are looking to read these other worlds in the same way as we've read the world as we know it. So we may be caught in this tautological cycle of pre-constructed meaning. And I think the important things that have come up here in this reading and the way that Denise and Valentina have done it are showing us these other possibilities. And one of the important things here is assuming our bodies, right? Not looking at our subjectivity as as something based on rationality or discourse, but something based on our bodies. And when we bring our bodies into the picture, we are bringing our sensibility and not just our rationality. We are bringing our lived experience into the picture. So when we're reading other forms of reading, which Tarot, for example, exemplifies, is this reading through the body, reading through sensibility, and not just reading by using intelligibility. Right? And this involves assuming opacity, so assuming the possibility of not knowing. And I think this was emphasized very significantly by Denise and Valentina by inviting us to collaborate, because it isn't a case that someone has the key to all of the meanings here. Meaning is something we have to make an effort in pursuing, in looking for. So the opacity is also the opacity in seeing or making sense of other worlds has also a power relationship involved, because we can contribute collaboratively to making sense and to perceiving these other worlds if they are all equally opaque to all of us, right? So it's not as if they're more transparent to some of us and more opaque to others. So if we all assume a possibility, this characteristic of opacity, then each of us can contribute and bring our lived experience and lived knowledge to make sense of this. Now, there is a problem when we bring when we're using our bodies, because we bring the tendencies to bring our lived knowledge, our experience, and this means that it is knowledge that we have learned. And the knowledge that we have learned at some cultural moment in our acquisition of this knowledge and experience, we have had to go through an unlearning. And in terms of reading, we see this happening with children when they are being made literate. Children have this natural possibility of using their bodies to make sense of the world, of using their bodily sensibility together with a budding capacity of intelligibility, but they are made to unlearn the use of their bodies. And when we make children literate, we make them focus on the alphabet, the letter, and everything else is noise. So all of our peripheral vision is, we unlearn it. It is seen to be meaningless noise. And with that, we learn to disconnect with our environment. And so these are things, when we bring our learning to help us to make sense, we also have to go through a process of unlearning our own learnings, to relearn, to go through a process of learning again. I'll stop there. So it's not about knowledge as being universal and knowledge as being rational. It's about using our bodies. It's about using our sensibilities. It's about using uncertainty. And this is where collaboration comes in. Well, I'll stop with the uncertainty because I'm speaking also from a position of sensibility and uncertainty.
Thank you, Limario. Valentina and Denise, would you like to say anything about that, or do you want to open it up to the whole group?
No, I just want to thank Limario for for the comments. It's just I don't know what to say about it. It's just what we're doing, and then what came out in the reading too. I think what's important was it's opacity, is uncertainty, and I would go like just adding, infinity. I mean, infinity and implicancy, right? I mean, it's open, and maybe the main challenge that we face now, maybe, I don't know, is to live with uncertainty and embrace it. And but anyway, we can, I think we could open.
Yeah, because it also is, I also would add maybe also the sociality, which I think goes with what you were bringing with the implicacy, because there's also, if somebody would have come in with, I don't know even about tarot, but that image looks like something, or I have read whatever information that might come in this moment to somebody, that could be a key to read the spread in yet another manner. And this for me is also an example of how to know, but also not be in control, to allow for things to happen, and also very partial knowledge. It's not as opaque, and maybe it's not equally opaque. There's different, but it is partial. And I think that's also about being present and being allowing to listen to each other in a different way. So to really also, this also part of that receptivity, to be able to welcome the informations, not necessarily with the critical attitude, but but in that receptive state. Sorry, we had a little visit from a non-human participant.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have a lot to sit with for a long time. So it's sort of fitting that it's just the end, but also the beginning. And one thing that just really resonated for me, because it's something I've been processing alongside this in other ways, is like the need for patience. I'm imagining, those of you who know Mama Maria, just saying paciencia, paciencia always, and knowing that she's right, and yet having a really hard time actually sitting with that and listening. I think it feels like there's so much to do, and there is, and many important things to do. And so the tendency is to rush to do it. And I feel this less in collective work, where I do have more patience and more just my own work, but I know people have different intensities in those areas, because it feels almost indulgent to just give yourself time to sit with these things and learn how to work with your medicine and integrate with other medicines. And sometimes I really push too fast. And most of the time, it doesn't have many negative effects that go super broad, but they can if we rush, if we don't do it carefully and with discernment and with having practiced it. And even if it doesn't have a huge negative effect, although it can, it really actually delays the work in the end, because you step over yourself and you take these detours that aren't actually useful because you're not giving yourself the time. And it feels almost like an abdication of responsibility to take that time. And it can be if it becomes indulgent or looking at your belly button, but it can also be from a space of deeper responsibility that, okay, I need to do this work and this learning in order to actually serve better. So anyway, that really came through for me in the reading, and I just wanted to share.
Yeah, I think it's a nice, it's a very nice way of describing that kind of study and collaboration that we saw at the bottom between the Three of Pentacles and the High Priestess, right? Because yes, I mean, it is not that there is nothing, there's nothing to be done, or it's not to do anything, but it's more, it is a doing that perhaps doesn't even go through, it's not a thing of the will, I will do it, but it's more a thing like, okay, so you feel what's happening fully, and then you move. And I think what is this movement? It's just moving together with what comes through both ways, from the unconscious and then from the world as we know it.
And Danny. So thank you very much for the session so far. What I wanted to open a little bit more into, I think, is the question of the body, because that's something that is a lot of the times mentioned as a type of possible, not antidote, but an ingredient that's missing and that we all carry all the time as we're having these conversations, and it's very hard to access how we can bring that knowledge into the conversations. And some of what I'm consistently dwelling with in working more closely with like body practices, physical practices, is how deceiving the body also is. It's not like the rational cognitive has been trained and we need to untrain it and it's all Western and so on. Our bodies have learned so many things, and this kind of other sensibility that we talk, and we often say, oh, if we focus on the body and its other sensibility, then we would be able to, but then you focus on the body and it's, numbed to this other sensibility. And like, how do you empty it so that it actually is able to remotely get closer to another way of feeling? And so I'm facing that like challenge a lot when, there's this yearning to bring the body more in, but then this patience with that too. And it's been very beautiful to be able to have this as a continuous process, because it's very much feeding into another parallel process that I'm experiencing that is a lot through the body. And when we were saying today, it's not about cooking, but it's about allowing ourselves to be cooked. There's something of that we have these conversations here, and then how do how do they cook us throughout the week, right? And they seem to be like doing that stirring until the next meeting and throughout. And one of the things, again, today that I feel is resonating in this cooking is that this patience with the body, like what else is there? So you feel an impulse and then you don't act on that impulse. And then if you distend that time behind that, there's something else, and there's something else, and there's something else. And, you know, like practices like meditation make you really pay attention to that, but you're not really invited to move. But there's other movement practices that invite you to that. And then at some point you do say, you know, act, you do make a move, but it's not the first move. It's not that first thing. And there's layers and layers to what, if we're patient enough in noticing, like this observation. And one of the things that in this observation I feel is also really alive is this like in the observation, there's always the counterpoint of that force, you know, when and this is like from martial arts and things like that. When you move in that direction, there's always the force in the other direction, right? And so it feels like whenever we're saying something and we're feeling through something, if you're patient enough to notice underneath that, there's the like creation, destruction. They're always acting together in the layered like nuances of everything we might be feeling. So yeah, that's a question that's very alive for me when we're needing to bring the body more into these these, you know, all these things that we're trying to live in our modes of being. I'm wondering what these emptying methodologies may be in the circumstances that we're facing, you know, because one thing is, you know, we're doing fasting for a certain period, or we're doing, you know, not internet for a certain other one. But when we're constantly so packed full of informations and sensations and so on, how can we be accessing another mode of sensing if we're always so full of sensations?
Yes. So, but then I think, you know, I agree that we can't move too quickly to the other dichotomy, and then body versus mind, and then hold on to the body as if it is that is salvation in the body. But then at the same time, we do engage in practices, right, that do work similar to meditation, or even beyond meditation, that in a way I actually know, as somebody who does Reiki, so that I know that not only can but do release the body, even if for a moment, from all those other things that you know, that it gathers and might become because we live in this world. But yeah, I think it's one part of our practice is precisely because we combine astrology, Reiki, tarot, and herbs sometimes, and now we have somebody else who's been working with part of the practice, Aurélie, who has a different tool. But yeah, so it's so much patience that we need, right? And then also, one of the things we talk about is, so there is patience, but there is also attention, right? Pay attention, which is, and then it's to attend to, but not trying to apprehend, right? Or to comprehend, which is also very much, which also requires patience. Yeah.
But also it allows to also maybe recompose other images of the body, because I mean, I'm also involved in like physical practices, and I study dance and somatic practices, and the body is very tricky. Like it's not more primary because it's felt. Like I learned through dance practices that I can make my sit bones shine. And now it's a real sensation for me. It's like on and off, but it doesn't, it's also the sensations are constructed. So how do you pay attention to these habits, including also this tension where things are held? When do they release? Sometimes you're having a conversation that is completely theoretical and something release, So how do you begin to pay attention to these things also to form, maybe it's like another world, but maybe another body too. Maybe, where does it begin and where does it stop? So can we have, the same way as we are a little bit limited by language or just talking about things, and we need to find other words and ways of engaging with language, maybe we also need other ways of engaging with sensations and how we feel. Our feelings are so trained, some response, emotional response. There is so much to but maybe instead of thinking about it as emptying out so that then we can do something, it's really a matter of recomposition. And what is beautiful, then it's a creative work, then it means it's also this undoing and this recomposing and this experimenting. It's also a creative work and it's a collective work. So maybe, I don't know, I'll never empty out and then be able to reconstruct it, but we go about doing this and trying this together. And that for me is it's something, I value.
Could I add just a tiny thing after this? I think what you've said about other possibilities for body is something really important too, because I think the tendency when we first superficially talk about the rational and the logic is then to think about the physical body, and that has like very, very specific boundaries to it, and I think when we're trying to invite in other possibilities for body that include collective body and metabolic body, and how those things blur into one another, that gets very generative. So yeah, thanks for opening that up.
I think Mario has his hand raised.
I thought
just to respond to what Dani said originally, and this idea of the body, that it's, I think we have to avoid universalizing the body as well. Otherwise, we're going back to the dichotomies as Denise mentioned, right? For me, when I do the work of bringing the body back into the picture, the body represents time and space. So it represents particular histories and particular spaces. So the body is always a step back from the universality and the atemporality to the particularity, to historicity from a particular perspective, not historicity from a universal perspective. So as an example, Dania, those of us who are accustomed to being racialized, for example, have a different relationship to our bodies, a different consciousness of our bodies than those who are not. That's one example of how universalization affects certain bodies in certain ways and other bodies in other ways, right? So it's not just simply let's now focus on the body. So it's the body as having a particular history which has been imposed on it, perhaps, or also has been learned. As you mentioned, our possibility of listening or understanding our bodies, for anyone who's starting out on meditation, for example, and sitting still in yoga, where you've got to unlearn, especially if you're a Westerner, you've got to unlearn a lot of the body language that you have been taught, right? You realize how the body is not simply something, we're not talking about nature, we're talking about something which has gone through a process, a very strong ideological process of learning and conditioning. So I think we have to take this learning and unlearning into account as well when we're talking about giving importance to the body.
Okay. I think first with the tarot layout, the thing that came to me was that when I looked at each card, and this happens when I'm doing the tarot as well, is I see it, there is a line of continuum of meaning, possibilities behind each card. And so you have to take the whole fluidity of that, of all of those cards together and their movement across this continuum, because there isn't a defined, clear understanding that comes with that. And my sense is that it's meant for you to sit with that for a much longer period of time and hold that with yourself, because as all of us know, individually we have learned and unlearned certain things at different levels and capacities. So it will hold different meanings. With my own work, what I'm finding working with the body, both in terms of my training in Reiki, my training in Qigong, my training in meditation, and then the numerology that I've been working with for a long time, those things give you one little component maybe in a lot of different components, and you absorb the information or the seed of information from any one of these things at any one time in your development or unlearning or learning process. So there's not a static, defined thing. It's a fluidity movement of awareness and deepening that. And one of the things that always comes through is that for me to understand that I'm not this mind, I'm not this body, I'm not this emotion, and yet I am. But that there is a way of sitting with the body, not as this is my body, this is a conduit. And if you can get to a space where you can clearly be that conduit, then what comes through is not you doing. But what comes through is what is needed. And whether you are working with someone or a space or an idea for healing, it is not your intention other than that you are to remain a conduit. And then what comes through is not for you to tell what it is. It is for the recipients, whether that be the environment, whether that be an individual, to understand, because you cannot heal. It is this act of holding yourself as a conduit, and then the healing comes through. So it's not you that is doing. Does that make sense or not? But within what I'm braiding together with all of my own practices and my experiences and witnessing, it's starting to make much more sense. And what I'm finding is that it's taking me in intention to something much broader. Because if it's not about me meaning fully me, I'm still here, but I'm part of this greater thing, and I have to trust that whatever I ask for anything else also is asking for myself, but not from a place of wanting. What will come to me is what I need. And sometimes it's not really comfortable, but I recognize it as a need. And so then it allows me to trust the process to go through that.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice description of the High Priestess, and actually also the position in which she is, which is, you know, our position in the spread, right? I was thinking in terms of being a channel. That's what my intuition said. That's it, and it goes through you. Yeah.
Also made me think. I tried to send the picture of the reading to the chat, but I couldn't. So now I sent it to Vanessa. So hopefully it's gonna get to the chat. But while you were talking, I also thought about this card again, and about it's hard to not be in control because of course you're so trained that you should know what to do or you should do something about it. And then I was thinking about this card as also the release part of not being in control, that maybe you don't have to do that much or be like what does it mean to be successful or do something or realize or have meaning if you stay in that okay, this is what I need to do and this is happening for a reason and I will manifest this, and like this, that also can be felt maybe as a release, as being able to leave behind an idea of what you were supposed to do or what is pedagogy, what is all those kinds of things that we come with. And maybe that this is not just you're blocking yourself and you have to be patient and you're like but that can also be experienced maybe as a healing and as letting something. I just thought about that card while you were talking, Ariko.
I think that is a really good transition for us to think into and feel into how do we want to be cooked forward instead of cooking, or both cooking and be cooked at the same time. And for that, we had the idea of, like, if we're thinking about being cooked, of separating into the different elements of a big meal. So we need different pots and pans and sauces and whatever it is for the cooking that will happen. And for that, there's a suggestion to create subgroups. So in the last survey, people answered, some of you answered, what are the themes that you would like to dive deeper into? And with the answers from that survey, we grouped it into 4 possible themes. Now we only have 19 minutes left. So the idea, we had an idea to create different subgroups, what do we call it, breakout rooms. But now I'm thinking that given the time we have, it might be more generative if I create a poll right now. How should we do it? I'm just talking to Kira, who's right next to me. Maybe let's share the screen with the topics we had in mind and do the brief exercise. And then in a poll, I'll ask you to choose one, and then we'll move from there. Does that sound like it makes a little bit of sense? It will make more sense in a second. I don't see any nods, so. Kira is sharing her screen now. And this is an image of mycelium, which, where like the individuals are the fruiting bodies, but they're all connected beneath. So, right, and the invitation was to, do you want to go into the dates? Or should we go into this first? Let's go into this first. Okay. So there is an invitation to kind of circle it back to the very first session that we had for those who were there with us. All back, Kira. So come in for that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all of the different intellectual and emotional and visceral things that came up and trying to reweave that into the very first meeting that we had 6 weeks ago, when we were talking about the period between 2038 and 2047, and going back into that story and how we were talking about the need for finally accepting that we were part of the problem and the need to pull our shit together and begin to compost and grow and engage with our messy and painful reality to avoid being wiped out, both the human and non-human. And just calling in the manifesto, or calling in the list of words. I'm just going to read it off. It said, then we all had to learn quickly collectively without schools or moral manifestos, to heal intellectually and emotionally, relationally, economically, ecologically, and politically, and to abolish colonial and racial violence and inequality, hierarchies of worth and separations, and to center the earth and decenter our egos, identities, human narratives, and projections, to age and die in generative ways, to care for everything and everyone rather than to compete, and to plant and to repurpose technology and to compost and to repair and to regenerate everything, to prioritize the common good for humans, non-humans, and the planet, to use words and conversation carefully and wisely, with humility and maturity, to own up and to sober up and to clean up and to grow up and to show up and to exist differently. And to allow those words to resonate inside you and maybe be called beyond the choice or beyond a place of comfort to a place to dig deeper, or a working group, one of the four here.
So the invitation is in the 4 areas that you see there. One is initiation, rites of passage. Beneath is braiding techniques and wisdom. Above is depth education, and to the side is aging and dying. To feel into these images, kind of like, it makes me resemble one, like the crosses in the tarot, actually. And we designed this way before seeing this spread today. Where are you feeling called to, if you are feeling called to go into? And try to not project into where are the areas that you maybe know more about, but where is the invitation coming through you to join any of these subgroups?
Make a poll.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna make a poll. And then in the poll, I'll invite you to choose only one. And then we'll figure out a way to then create some subgroups, potentially in the next session or potentially over an email thread.
Just stop sharing.
Yeah, I think you have to stop sharing your screen. I don't have the option for polls right now. Okay, so the way we're gonna do this then, because it's not giving me the option for a poll, I'm not sure why.
It's in the chat.
No, it's not in the chat. If you know which one of these 4 you would like to be a part of, maybe Kira, you can share your screen again. Write it on the chat. And then what Kira and I will do is really quickly put you in some breakout rooms where you can just get to make eye contact with the people that you will be in your subgroups with if you so choose. And just to give a little bit of context, the invitation is to meet potentially bi-weekly. So not next week, but the week after, the 9th of November, the green dates are there. Then not the 2nd, but then the 16th, not the 23rd, and not the 30th, but then back the 6th. And hopefully the other invitation is that we come back, all of us together, on the 13th of January. So the idea is for us to meet 3 more times and keeping Wednesdays at the same time, kind of like honoring the idea that maybe this is a practice already, that Wednesdays at this time is a practice for each one of you to hone into this group. And we completely understand and respect if people have other commitments. And you can also change the dates with your subgroups if you so choose to. So if you feel like you know which of these groups you would like to be a part of, please, the invitation right now is to write it in the chat. Just write the name of the title and we will
Your name and the title.
Your name and the title of the category. And if you have any questions, I know this was a little bit confusing, please unmute yourself and this is the time to do it. Okay.
me just take the time to say thank you to Valentina and to Denise before we go into the groups, because I don't know if they're going to be sticking around for the rest of it, but it was an incredible gift that you gave to us. And I'll be looking at it definitely more and more as we move forward. And if you can come back and do another reading at another stage of the process, that would be really, really valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really nice conversation. Thank you, everybody.
So I think we will receive an email with the questionnaire for this session, and also with some information about the interest groups. And then from there, we'll see what happens. We will try to follow the schedule, but for sure we'll be together back again on the 13th of May to report back or to have a different conversation. Sorry, 13th of January. 13th of January, we're all back together. I hope you have a great time with your groups and you have a great holiday season as well. Thank you so much for being in the series. Please don't forget to complete the last questionnaire. And I should be able to send you the last compilation on next Tuesday, also with more information about the interest groups. So again, Miigwech, obrigada, thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Which?